Katie Morgan sat in the cold metal room and tried not to shake. The walls glowed with a soft purple light. Everything smelled wrong, like burned metal and something else she could not name. She pressed her back against the wall and thought about how this day had started. She had been hiking in Montana. The sky was blue. The air was clean. Then a bright light came from nowhere and everything changed. Now she was here in this strange place, and she knew it was not anywhere on Earth. The door opened, but not like a normal door. It just disappeared, turning into tiny pieces of light. 3 tall figures walked in. They were not human. Their skin looked like liquid metal, silver and gold mixed together. Their eyes were huge and completely black. When they looked at her, Katie felt like they could see right through her. The one in the middle wore clothes that moved like water. When it spoke, Katie did not hear words with her ears. The voice came directly into her mind, cold and clear. The alien said humans were weak. It said humans fought each other for no good reason. It said humans should have died out long ago, but somehow they kept living. The aliens wanted to know why. They wanted to test Katie. They wanted to see how long she could survive against their best hunter. Katie stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she made them strong. She had been in the army. She had seen bad things before. Fear was just another enemy, and she knew how to fight enemies. She asked what they meant by test. The alien showed her a picture in the air. It was not a normal picture. It moved and looked real. Katie saw a creature that made her blood turn cold. The thing was huge, bigger than a bear. Its body was covered in black scales that looked hard as diamonds. It had 6 legs with claws like knives. The head looked like a wolf, but the mouth had too many teeth, rows and rows of sharp points. The eyes burned with intelligence. This was not just an animal. This thing could think. The alien called it the Vexthor. It said this creature had killed warriors from over 40 different alien races. No one had ever survived more than 7 minutes against it. The alien said they wanted to watch Katie die. They wanted to study how humans felt pain. They wanted to see the moment when she gave up hope. Katie felt anger rise in her chest. These beings were not evil in the way she understood evil. They were scientists. To them, she was just a lab rat, something to study and throw away. She asked what would happen if she refused to fight. The alien said they would test her in other ways. They would put her in space without air. They would crush her body. They would let her die of thirst. Eventually, they would make her fight the creature anyway. Fighting now would be faster, less painful in the long run. Katie looked at the picture of the Vexthor again. She thought about her sister Amy back home. She thought about her little niece who loved to hear stories about Aunt Katie's adventures. She thought about the blue Montana sky and the mountains she had been hiking. Then she remembered something her old army boss had taught her. When you cannot win the game, you change the rules. You find a different way to fight. Katie told them she would fight. But she wanted a weapon. The aliens seemed to talk to each other without words. Their thoughts moved too fast for her to hear. Finally, the leader spoke again. It said she could choose one thing from Earth, something she knew how to use. It would not help her win, but it might make her feel better before she died. Katie smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a soldier who had found a plan. She asked for her knife, the one she had been carrying when they took her. It was a good knife, 7 inches long with a fixed blade. Her father had carried it in the Vietnam War. She had carried it through 2 tours in the Middle East. It had history. It had killed before. The aliens showed her another picture. All her hiking gear was laid out on a table somewhere in their ship. Her knife was there, the blade still clean and sharp. The alien said she could have it. They would give her 24 hours to prepare. Then the test would begin. The aliens left and the door came back. Katie was alone again. But this time she was not shaking. She had a whole day to get ready. A whole day to think and plan. A whole day to remember every dirty trick she had ever learned about staying alive in combat. She sat down on the floor and closed her eyes. The aliens thought they were running a simple experiment. They thought they had the perfect killer and the perfect victim. They expected her to die quickly and give them useful information about human weakness. But they had made mistakes. Big mistakes. They had given a trained soldier time to prepare. They had given her motivation to survive. And worst of all, they had made it personal. They had taken her from her home. They had threatened her. They had treated her like an animal. Katie opened her eyes and started to think. She was not thinking about how to survive for 7 minutes. She was thinking about how to win. Because that was what humans did. When someone pushed them down, they got back up. When someone said they could not do something, they did it anyway. When someone gave them an impossible choice, they made their own choice. She thought about the creature she had seen in the picture. 6 legs meant it was fast and stable. Hard scales meant her knife would not cut easily. Sharp teeth meant she could not let it bite her. But every creature had weaknesses. Eyes could be hurt. Joints could be damaged. Soft spots existed somewhere. The Vex Thor had killed over 400 beings. But those beings had probably fought the way their species always fought. They had used their natural weapons and their natural strategies. They had played the game the aliens expected. Katie was not going to do that. Humans were good at being unpredictable. They were good at using tools. They were good at thinking of new ways to solve old problems. Most of all, they were good at refusing to quit even when quitting made sense. She stood up and started to pace the small room. 24 hours. She would use every second. She would think about every possibility. She would prepare her mind and her body. And when they brought her to face their perfect killer, she would show them something they had never seen before. She would show them what happened when you cornered a human and gave them no way out. She would show them that humans did not need to be the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced. They just needed to be too stubborn to die. The aliens had tested their deadliest wolf against what they thought was a weak human girl. They thought they knew how this story would end. But they were about to learn a hard lesson. They were about to learn what humanity really meant, and they were going to regret it. The 24 hours passed too fast. Katie had used every minute to think and plan. The aliens gave her food that tasted like nothing. They gave her water that was too clean. She ate and drank because she needed strength. But her mind was focused on one thing: how to kill the Vex Thor. When the door opened again, the 3 aliens came back. This time there were more of them, maybe 12 or 15. They said nothing. They just pointed for her to follow. Katie walked behind them through long hallways that glowed purple. She tried to remember the path, but everything looked the same. They went down a ramp that seemed to go on forever. The air got warmer. Katie heard a deep sound like a drumbeat, but she felt it in her bones more than heard it with her ears. They walked through one more door and came out into a huge space. The arena was massive, as big as a football stadium. The ceiling was clear like glass, and she could see stars above. But they were not Earth stars. These were completely wrong, patterns she had never seen before. It made her stomach feel sick to look at them. The ground was covered in dark red sand. There were stone pillars scattered around, some tall and some short. There were plants that looked almost like trees, but their leaves moved on their own, even though there was no wind. Rocks and boulders were placed here and there. The whole thing was set up like a stage, a place for a good show. Around the edges of the arena, platforms rose up in rows. They were filling with aliens, not just the tall silver ones. Katie saw creatures of every shape and size. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange her brain hurt trying to understand what she was seeing. They all watched her like people at a zoo watching an animal. One of the aliens handed her the knife. Her knife. Katie took it and felt the weight in her hand. The handle was worn smooth from years of use. Her father had carried this knife through a war. She had carried it through 2 wars. It was just a piece of metal, but it meant something. It was part of her history. The lead alien spoke in her mind again. It said the fight would start when she entered the arena. 30 seconds later, they would release the Vex Thor. There was no escape. The walls could not be climbed. Fighting was her only choice, though it would not help. It told her to die with dignity. Katie looked at the arena. Then she looked back at the alien. She asked what would happen if she won. The question seemed to confuse them. Several aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. The leader tilted its head like it was curious about something strange. It said she could not win. But if she somehow survived, they would send her home. Survival would prove humans were worth studying more, maybe even worth talking to. But in 400 fights across 43 different species, no one had ever survived. The Vex Thor was perfect. It never lost. Perfect. Katie thought about that word. Nothing was perfect. Everything had a weakness. Every creature had habits you could predict. Every hunter had patterns you could learn and use against it. She walked into the arena. The sand was loose under her boots. Each step sank down a little. Not good for running fast, but maybe she could use it. The stone pillars were spaced out randomly. Some were 10 feet tall, others 20 feet or more. The tree-like plants had solid trunks, and those weird moving leaves created shadows that shifted constantly. Katie found a spot about 30 yards from where she had entered. She put her back against one of the bigger pillars. The stone was rough with good places to grip. She checked her knife one more time. The edge was still sharp. She had kept it that way always, then she waited. Her heart was pounding hard, but her hands were steady. She was afraid, but the fear was far away. She had put it in a box in her mind, the same place she always put it when her army unit went out on dangerous patrols. A sound echoed through the arena. On the opposite side, a gate started to rise. The drumbeat sound got louder, and Katie realized it was coming from the Vexthor. The creature was making noise, a sound that started so low she could not hear it at first. Then it rose into a scream that made her teeth hurt. Then she saw it. The picture had not done it justice. The creature was huge, each movement smooth and controlled. Its black scales caught the light and made rainbow colors across its body. 6 legs moved in perfect coordination. Those eyes locked onto her immediately, smart eyes. That was important. Katie had spent all her time in the cell thinking about that intelligence. A smart predator was dangerous, yes, but intelligence meant thinking. Thinking meant patterns. Patterns could be broken. The Vexthor did not charge right away. It circled, staying low, studying her, looking for weak points. Katie turned with it, keeping the pillar at her back, holding the knife loose in her right hand. She thought about those 43 species, all those warriors who had died here. What had they done? Probably tried to fight straight on, used their strength or their speed or whatever made their species special. They had played the game the way the aliens wanted. Katie was not going to play that game. The Vexthor made its first move, a fast dart to the left, testing her reactions. Katie did not move. She did not even blink. She just watched and learned. The creature's front left leg moved slightly different from the others. So small most people would miss it. An old injury maybe, or just how it was built. The second move came faster. A fake move, right? Then a sudden jump forward. Katie threw herself sideways, rolling in the sand, coming up with her back to a different pillar. The Vexthor's jaws snapped shut where she had been standing. Those terrible teeth clicked together hard enough to break bones. Katie did not run. Running would make the creature want to chase her, and then she would be dead in seconds. Instead, she backed away slowly, keeping eye contact, knife up, ready to defend. The creature followed. Its movements got more aggressive. It was getting impatient. Good. Patience was something humans were good at. Katie led it on a slow chase through the arena. She used the pillars and the weird plants as cover. She never quite let it corner her, but she never ran either. She counted seconds in her head. 2 minutes gone. 5 more minutes until the aliens expected her to be dead. The Vexthor was beautiful in a terrible way. Every movement was calculated and efficient. But it was also predictable because it was so perfect. It had been trained to kill efficiently. It had not been trained to deal with prey that refused to act like prey. 4 minutes. The creature was circling faster now, making more noise, frustrated. Katie saw her chance. One of the plant things had a low branch thick enough to hold her weight. She made her move, running straight at the plant. The Vexthor took the bait and charged with all 6 legs pumping. Katie grabbed the branch and swung herself up. The creature's speed carried it past her. Its jaws closed on nothing but air. Katie did not hesitate. She dropped from the branch onto the creature's back, driving her knife down. She had aimed for the neck, but the scales were harder than she expected. The blade slid off, barely scratching the surface. The Vexthor bucked hard and threw her off. Katie hit the sand hard, rolled, came up running. The creature spun with impossible speed. Pain exploded across her left shoulder as one of those claws caught her, tearing through her shirt and skin. First blood. Katie ignored the pain. She had been hurt before in combat. Pain was just information. She pulled back again, circling, and the Vexthor followed. But it moved differently now. It had hurt her. It expected her to get weaker. 6 minutes. Katie was breathing hard. Her shoulder was screaming at her. But she had learned something important. The scales were too hard from above. But what about underneath? Every creature had soft spots. Eyes could be damaged. Bellies were not as protected. She just had to create the right opportunity. The Vexthor charged again. This time Katie did not dodge. She waited until the last possible second, then dropped flat to the sand. The creature's speed carried it over her. As its belly passed overhead, Katie struck upward with the knife. The blade found flesh. The Vexthor made a sound that made everyone in the audience go silent. Katie rolled away as the creature thrashed around. She saw dark blood, almost black, staining the sand. Not a killing blow, but a wound. The perfect predator was bleeding. 7 minutes. Katie was still alive. The aliens had said 7 minutes was the record. She had just tied it. The Vexthor turned toward her, and for the first time she saw something different in those eyes. Anger. Good. Angry meant mistakes. Katie smiled through the pain, knife ready. The real fight was just beginning. The wound Katie had made was not deep, but it changed everything. The Vexthor moved differently now. It was more careful. It protected its injured belly. The audience above had stopped making noise. Now there was a rising sound of surprise, disbelief. This was not supposed to happen. 8 minutes. 9 minutes. Katie's left arm was mostly useless now. Blood ran down to her fingertips. But she had already switched the knife to her right hand anyway. Her body was screaming for rest. Her lungs were burning. But she could not afford to stop. The moment she stopped, she died. The Vexthor was learning too. It stopped making big lunging attacks. Instead, it tried to push her into corners. It used its size to limit her options. Katie fought back by staying mobile. She never let herself get trapped. She used every obstacle in the arena. She grabbed handfuls of the dark sand and threw it at the creature's face when it charged. It did not blind the Vexthor, but it made it blink. That gave her split seconds to move. She used the moving leaves of the plants to confuse it. She made fake moves toward its injured side to make it flinch. 10 minutes. Katie's movements were getting slower. The blood loss was catching up with her. The Vexthor seemed to sense it and pressed harder. Another slash caught her right thigh. Not deep, but enough to make her leg buckle. She went down on one knee. The creature saw its chance and charged. All 6 legs pushed it forward with terrible speed. Katie waited. The knife was in her hand, held backward. The jaws were inches from her face. Then she fell backward and let the creature's own speed carry it over her. She drove the knife upward with both hands into the soft tissue under its jaw. The blade sank deep. All 7 inches disappeared into flesh. The Vexthor's scream was so loud it hurt Katie's ears. Its weight crashed down on her. 6 legs were kicking and scratching. Claws raked across her body. Katie held onto the knife and twisted it. Hot blood poured over her hands. The creature shook once, twice, then it went still. Katie lay there, trapped under a body that was easily 4 times her weight. She could not breathe right. Above her, the arena had gone completely silent. No sounds from the audience. Nothing. Just the ragged sound of her own breathing and her heart pounding. She tried to push the creature off her with what little strength she had left. It did not move. She could feel darkness coming. Her vision was getting fuzzy around the edges. Blood loss, shock, exhaustion. Everything was catching up at once. Then hands were pulling the Vexthor's body off her. Alien hands. She was lifted and carried. The stars above spun crazily. Then there was nothing. Katie woke up to pain. Everything hurt, but it was different now. It was the controlled hurt of healing, not the raw pain of fresh wounds. She tried to move and found she could not. Something was holding her arms and legs. Panic hit her until she opened her eyes and saw why. She was in some kind of medical room. Equipment surrounded her that looked like it came from a science fiction movie. Lights pulsed in rhythms that seemed connected to her heartbeat. The things holding her were not meant to trap her. They were keeping her still while the alien technology worked on her body. Her shoulder was covered in a gel that glowed blue. The wounds on her thigh and body were covered the same way. As she watched, she could actually see the flesh growing back together. Impossibly fast, the door opened and the lead alien entered. It was alone this time. It came to her bed and stood there staring at her with those black eyes. When it spoke, the voice in her mind seemed different somehow, less certain. It said she should not have survived. Katie's throat was dry, but she managed to speak. She said humans were good at doing things they should not be able to do. The alien said the Vexthor had killed 417 beings, warriors and hunters from species far stronger than humans. Humans were fragile and slow. Their weapons were primitive. By all their calculations, Katie should have died in the first 30 seconds. Katie said calculations did not account for stubbornness or spite. She really had not wanted to give them the satisfaction of watching her die. The alien was quiet for a long moment. It said they had studied humans for centuries but did not understand. Humans should have died out long ago. Their world was hostile. Their bodies were weak. They fought each other constantly. Yet they not only survived, they grew stronger. The aliens had tried to understand by watching. They were wrong. Katie asked what they were wrong about. The aliens said humanity's strength was not in their bodies or their technology. It was in their refusal to accept defeat. Every other species, when faced with certain death, accepted it. They embraced it. Katie had fought. Even when wounded, even when the logical choice was to give up, she continued to fight. This was not rational behavior. Katie laughed, though it hurt. She said humans were pretty good at being irrational. It was kind of their thing. The alien said she had created a problem for them. The council was meeting even now. Her survival had implications that reached far beyond this ship. Katie asked what kind of implications. The alien turned to leave, then stopped at the doorway. It said they were known as the Lords of Trial. For 10,000 years they had tested species to determine their worth. They removed the weak and elevated the strong. They maintained order in this part of space. They did this through tests of strength, intelligence, and endurance. The Vexthor trial was their final judgment. Failure meant extinction. Success meant joining the galactic community. Katie felt cold run through her. She asked if they were going to kill all humans because of this test. The alien said they were planning to. Humans showed promise, but also concerning traits: violence, irrationality, emotional instability. They believed humans would fail the trial. That would give them justification to eliminate humanity before they became a threat. Katie said she had passed. She had survived. The alien agreed. She had done more than survive. She had adapted. She had turned weakness into advantage. She had done what 400 species could not. She had killed the unkillable. The council now had to decide what this meant for humanity's future. And for their own, the alien left. Katie was alone again with the pulsing lights and the pain that was slowly, impossibly fading away. She stared at the clear ceiling, at those alien stars, and tried to process what she had just learned. She had killed their perfect predator. She had survived their final judgment. And in doing so, she might have just saved her entire species from being wiped out, or she might have started a war. It was hard to tell which. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again, for her, for humanity, for the galaxy. 3 days passed in the medical room. Katie's wounds healed with a speed that would have been impossible on Earth. The blue gel worked like magic. By the end of the second day, she could walk without pain. By the third day, only thin scars remained. They were silver lines that traced across her shoulder and thigh like lightning. Different aliens came to look at her. They said nothing. They just stood at the doorway and watched with faces she could not read. Some seemed curious. Others looked almost afraid. Katie found that last reaction the most interesting. On the fourth day, the lead alien returned with 6 others as an escort. They wore different robes this time. The robes had symbols on them that seemed to shift and change as she looked at them. The lead alien said the council had reached a decision. Katie was to be brought before them. This was something new. Never before had a trial survivor been granted a meeting with the full Council of Lords. Katie stood and tested her legs one more time. Strong, steady. She asked what would happen if she refused. The alien said they would assume humanity wanted no contact with the greater galactic community. They would leave humans to their own fate. Katie would be returned to Earth and they would never speak again. Something in the way it said that made Katie pause. She said that did not sound like the worst option. The alien said perhaps not. But there were other powers in the galaxy. Powers less patient than they were. Powers more interested in conquering than testing. The Lords offered structure, order, and protection. Without it, humanity would face threats they could not imagine. Katie thought about that. About Earth, alone and unaware of the dangers lurking in space. She said she would meet the council, but she would walk in on her own feet, not as a prisoner. The alien said that was acceptable. They led her through hallways she had not seen before, deeper into the ship. The walls here were different. They were covered in what looked like living circuits. Pulses of light flowed through patterns that made her eyes hurt to follow. Other aliens passed them in the halls. Every single one stopped to stare at Katie. Word had spread. The council chamber was huge, a sphere easily 200 feet across. The walls were the same clear material as the arena ceiling. Katie could see they were no longer near Earth. The stars outside were completely unfamiliar. One massive blue giant star dominated the view. Its light filled the chamber with an eerie glow. 12 platforms floated in the air around the center of the chamber. On each platform stood one of the silver aliens. These were larger than the others. Their robes were more elaborate. The air around them seemed to shimmer with power. Katie was guided to a smaller platform that rose from the floor to meet the others. She stood there, alone in the center of the council's attention. She refused to let herself show fear. She had faced their perfect killer and won. These were just politicians in fancy robes. One of the council members spoke. Its robe had more symbols than the others. The mental voice was deeper and older. It said Katie had done what they believed impossible. 417 times they had conducted the trial of the Vexthor. 417 times the result was death. Katie was the first to survive. The first to kill. Katie said she got lucky. She kept her voice steady. Another council member spoke. It said no. They had analyzed every moment of the trial. Luck played a very small role. Katie had adapted. She had predicted. She had used tools not as weapons but as force multipliers. She had turned her physical weakness into tactical advantage. This was not luck. This was what humans called ingenuity. Katie shrugged. She said humans were good at making do with what they had. It came from living on a planet that had been trying to kill them since they first evolved. The lead council member's platform drifted closer. It said humans had thrived in conditions that would destroy most other species. High gravity, extreme temperature changes, predators at every level, disease, natural disasters. And yet humans persisted. They did not understand this. They saw only violence and chaos. They failed to see the strength beneath. Katie asked what happened now. She asked if they were still planning to wipe out humanity. Silence filled the chamber. The council members seemed to be talking among themselves. Their thoughts moved too fast for Katie to hear. Finally, the lead member spoke again. It said they had reconsidered. The trial was meant to be a formality, a final check before judgment. Instead, it had become a revelation. They now understood that their methods were flawed. Strength was not merely physical. Intelligence was not merely computational. Humans possessed qualities they had not adequately measured. Katie said that was a nice way of saying they were wrong. Another wave of silence filled the room. Katie wondered if she had pushed too far. Then something surprising happened. Several of the council members made sounds that translated as laughter. The lead member said yes, they were wrong. This was difficult for them to admit. They had ruled this region of space for thousands of years. Their judgments had been absolute. To be proven wrong by a species they thought was inferior was humbling. Katie felt something shift in the room. These beings, for all their power and technology, were capable of growth, of change. That was more than she had expected. The lead council member continued. It offered humanity a choice. First choice, they would leave humans alone. Humans would develop at their own pace and face their own challenges. The lords would not interfere. Humans would be unprotected from other galactic powers, but they would be free. Katie asked about the second choice. The alien said they invited humanity to join the Galactic Concordat. Humans would be given access to technology, knowledge, and trade routes, protection from hostile species. In exchange, they would be subject to Concordat law and would be expected to contribute to the greater community. Katie thought about that. About everything humanity could gain, everything they could lose. She said that was a decision way above her level. She was just a hiker who got in a fight with their pet monster. The council member said perhaps, but she was also the first human to face the trial and survive. She had earned the right to speak for her species in this moment. What would she choose? Katie looked out at the blue giant star. She thought about home, about her sister and niece, about billions of people going about their lives completely unaware that their future hung in the balance. She said she would choose freedom. Every time. But she would also choose knowledge. So here was what she thought. The aliens should give humans the information. Tell their leaders what was out here, what the threats were, what the opportunities were. Then let humans decide for themselves. Do not make the choice for them. They had earned at least that much. The council considered this. Katie could feel the weight of their combined thoughts, processing her words. Weighing consequences, the lead member spoke at last. It said that was acceptable. They would make contact with Earth's leaders. They would provide information and offer the choice. The decision would be humanity's to make. Relief washed through Katie so strong it made her knees weak. She said thank you. The council member said no, they should thank her. She had given them a great gift. She had shown them that their certainty was arrogance, that even they, the Lords of Trial, had much to learn. Humans might yet teach the galaxy new ways of surviving, new ways of thriving. Katie smiled. She said humans were good at being teachers, even when nobody wanted to be a student. The aliens returned Katie to Earth exactly where they had taken her, on that mountain trail in Montana. The change was instant. One moment she was standing on the alien platform. The next moment she was back among pine trees and familiar air. The sun was setting and casting long shadows across the valley below. She stood there for a long moment, just breathing. Earth air, earth smells, the rustle of wind through real trees, not alien copies. It had only been a week, but it felt like years. Her backpack was exactly where she had left it. Nothing had touched it. Inside, her phone had messages. Dozens of them. Her sister getting more and more worried. Friends, the ranger station. Katie looked at the date and time on the screen. Only 3 hours had passed since she was taken. The aliens had explained it on the trip back. Time dilation. Their ship existed partially outside normal space. What had been a week for her had been only hours on Earth. Katie did not fully understand how it worked, but she was grateful. At least she would not have to explain where she had been for days. She made it back to her car as darkness fell. She drove the 2 hours back to her apartment in Billings. The normalcy of it all felt strange and unreal. Traffic lights, gas stations, people going about their lives completely unaware that everything was about to change. The aliens had promised to make contact within a month. They would appear before the United Nations. They would offer their information and their choice. Katie had asked to be kept out of it, at least at first. She did not want to be the face of humanity's first contact with aliens. She just wanted to go home. But as she lay in her own bed that night, staring at her ceiling instead of alien stars, Katie knew that was not really true. She had been changed by what happened. She had killed a creature that had killed over 400 beings. She had faced down a council of alien lords and spoken for her entire species. There was no going back to normal after that. Her phone rang. Her sister Amy. Katie answered and heard her sister's worried voice asking if she was okay. Amy said she had been trying to reach her for hours. She asked if Katie had gotten lost on the trail. Katie smiled at the sound of her sister's voice. So normal, so wonderfully human. She said she was fine. Just had some phone trouble. The battery died. She was home now. Amy said Katie had scared her half to death. She made Katie promise to be more careful out there. Anything could happen. Katie looked at the thin scars on her shoulder that the alien medicine had left behind. She said yes, anything could happen. She promised to be careful. They talked for a while longer. Amy filled her in on her niece's latest achievements. Normal details of normal life. When they finally said goodbye, Katie felt the weight of what she knew pressing down on her. In a month, Amy's world would be turned upside down. Everyone's world would. She thought about the aliens, the Lords of Trial who had judged humanity and found them wanting, who had been proven wrong. She thought about the Vexthor, that perfect killing machine that had met an imperfect human and lost. Most of all, she thought about what the lead council member had said, that humanity's strength was not in their bodies or their technology. It was in their refusal to give up, in their ability to adapt, to survive, to keep fighting even when logic said they should surrender. Katie got out of bed and went to her closet. She pulled out her old military footlocker. Inside, among medals and photos and other memories, was her knife. Cleaned now, the blood washed away, but she could still see the small mark in the blade where it had hit the Vexthor's scales. She held it and felt the familiar weight. She made a decision. When the aliens made contact, when humanity was given their choice, Katie would step forward. She would tell her story. Not as a hero, but as proof. Proof that humans could face the impossible and survive. That they could stand against the darkness and refuse to break. The galaxy thought it knew what humanity was. A young species, violent and chaotic. Probably not worth the trouble. The Lords of Trial had planned to test them, judge them, and most likely eliminate them as a potential threat. They had tested their deadliest wolf against one human girl. They expected a quick death and useful data. Instead, they discovered something that scared them more than any weapon or technology. They discovered that humanity did not know how to quit, that humans looked at impossible odds and saw a challenge instead of certain death, that they would fight with anything, use everything around them, and refuse to surrender even when every calculation said they should. Katie put the knife away and went back to bed. In a month, the world would know about aliens, about the threats lurking in the dark between stars, about the choice humanity would have to make. But Katie knew which choice they would make. She knew it in her bones, in the same stubborn streak that had kept her fighting in that alien arena. Humanity would choose to face the galaxy on their own terms. They would stumble and fall and make mistakes because that was what humans did, but they would get back up. They always did. The Lords of Trial had tested their deadliest wolf against a human girl. They expected to confirm their beliefs about human weakness. Instead, they learned a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Never underestimate humanity. Because when you push them to the edge, when you give them no way out, when you force them to choose between giving up and death, they will find a third option. They will fight. They will adapt. They will win. And they will make you regret ever doubting them. Katie smiled in the darkness and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would start figuring out how to explain all this to Amy. But tonight, she would just sleep in her own bed, under Earth's sky, surrounded by the sounds of her own world. She had earned that much, and so much more. The aliens had come to Earth to judge humanity, to test whether they deserved to exist. They had brought their perfect killer and their absolute certainty, but they left with doubt, with respect, with fear, because they had learned what every enemy of humanity eventually learned. You could have better weapons. You could have stronger bodies. You could have superior technology, but you could never have more determination than a human who refused to quit. You could never be more dangerous than a species that turned weakness into strategy. You could never be more terrifying than creatures who looked at certain death and said, "Not today." The alien lords had tested their deadliest wolf with a human girl, and they would regret it forever, not because she had killed their creature, but because now they knew the truth. Humanity was not a species to be judged or eliminated. They were a species to be feared, to be respected, to be left alone, or better yet, to be befriended. Because if humans were this dangerous as enemies, imagine what they could be as allies. That was the real lesson the Lords of Trial had learned. The real reason they offered humanity a choice instead of a sentence. Katie drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face. The galaxy had no idea what was coming, but they would learn. Humanity was here, and they were not going anywhere.